Welcome to downtown Syracuse for the RetroGameCon. Boom shakalaka!
Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and I am traveling to Syracuse, New York for the RetroGameCon Expo. However, I have never been to Syracuse, New York, and since I'm traveling all the way from Seattle, I decided that it would be fun to show up a couple days early and take a walk around town, check out the area a little bit. So in this video, not only am I going to do some video game hunting at the expo, but I'm also going to check out Green Lakes State Park. I'm going to travel to Rochester, New York and visit the amazing Strong National Museum of Play. I'm also going to check out a pretty awesome music store. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to show you everything that I picked up on my trip. That's going to be the music and the video games. Let's take a look. Landing in Syracuse, New York, I have to admit it was gorgeous out, and the first thing I wanted to do was, check out some nature. Now you hear a lot about how beautiful upstate New York is, and on this day I was blown away. It was gorgeous outside. Took a trip up to Green Lakes State Park, and man, it's beautiful here. So this state park is about 15 minutes outside of Syracuse, and essentially, I guess it's two glacier lakes that are surrounded by thick forest. And it's so cool that this is so close to the city. I mean, if you live in Syracuse or the surrounding area, you've got to come here. I ended up walking the entire length of one of the lakes, and that works out to be about 2 miles. And again, it was just breathtaking at every turn. I couldn't stop taking photos and video. It was just so great. And man, check out the color of that water. So blue, so beautiful. A couple hours later, I drove back into town and visited the Soundgarden record store. I mean, how could I not? It's named after one of the greatest Seattle bands ever. And as you can see here, it's a very big store, and they have a great music selection in here. Lots and lots and lots of rock and metal. Way more than I typically see at an indie record store. They also had some cool t-shirts. I had to check those out. And I ended up buying a bunch of records, both old and new. But I was like, how am I going to get all these home? Well, thankfully, they actually have free shipping, which is great. So I'm going to show those at the end of the video. When I started planning this trip, everyone's like, hey, you're going to be very close to an amazing museum. And so I wanted to make sure that I had time to visit that. So right now we're going to be heading to the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, which is about an hour and a half west of Syracuse.
We are on our way to the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. This is going to be so cool. This place, minds will be blown.
Now guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to have a hard time summing up just how amazing this place is with the amount of time that I have for this video. I mean, I was blown away. I'm not kidding. This place was incredible. This was established in the 1960s, and at its core, it is a fully interactive museum dedicated to pretty much everything that is pop culture. You've got entire sections dedicated to board games, superheroes, toys, even pinball. But then you've got massive sections dedicated just to video games and the history of video games. As you would expect, you've got arcade games sprinkled all around the building and all available for you to play. But then you have interactive areas where you and your friends or your family can compete. This area was really fun because it's very tactile, right? Everything is meant for you to walk up and grab and twist and hold. Yeah, this is pretty cool. And this place doesn't skimp on the wow factor either. I really like how the multimedia section of digital gaming kind of reminded me of the E3 Expo in Los Angeles, where all these game companies go to put on a show. I like the mix of big video screens displaying games and developers and history, but there's also collectibles and, important and interesting pieces of history. And so much of it was interactive too, and that's the big selling point of this place. It's not meant to be just, you know, a museum you walk around with your hands behind your back, you know. No, you get to actually walk up and examine stuff and play with things. But wait, that's not even the impressive part, because we actually got a private tour behind the scenes of the entire museum. This is Sega?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that is really cool.
Isn't that really cool?
Like the Sega logo. Yeah,
exactly.
Service games. Yeah.
That's the very first Sega game?
Very first.
Wow. Actually, the bag, probably made of leather, is still in good condition, right?
Yeah, it looks like it is. I'm just like afraid
Yeah.
to touch it.
Rooms and rooms filled with video games of all types, consoles, arcades, PCs, etc. It just went on and on and on. We even got access to some of the rooms where they store and maintain these systems. One of the employees, her name is Lindsay, was assigned to just walk us through room by room, where pretty much just the staff gets to go.
So do you have like a favorite system? I have complete collections of Mega Drive, N64, Super Famicom, Famicom, Sega Saturn.
Complete collections.
PCFX, yeah. Got them all. I love the PCFX. It's like my current obsession.
Nice.
Yeah. And so this is all the extra stuff that they have, all the archival stuff that they get. I mean, this is like, I don't even like if I can like explain how much space this is. It's incredible.
This boxing game for the Famicom from Konami, your controller is this inflatable punching bag. This inflatable punching dummy, you punch them and it represents punches on the game. It's from Konami for the Famicom. Isn't that great?
Wow.
1987. Yeah, there's so many weird controllers in Japan. I love it. Along with the inflatable punching bag controller, the punching dummy, this one here, Top Rider for the Famicom, your controller is an inflatable motorbike there.
Oh, dude, I want that, and I would probably pop it in a second.
Oh.
I love that.
Oh yeah.
It's like, like Odyssey
I
style.
love that. Yeah, and the games are fun.
Nice.
Back here, they've got really old board games. They've got like classic toys. They've got G.I. Joes, yo-yos, Hot Wheels, Transformers. Speaking of board games, check out these really old board games from like over 100 years ago.
What age are you thinking? Do you have like a year?
So these are like turn of the century. So
Oh yeah, look at this, 1887.
Yeah, exactly.
Representing the centennial. Here's a deck of cards from 1887.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are like little games, card games.
Fun for part. There's even an entire section up here where it's a library, and so they have books and magazines, a lot of them video game related, but really it's anything that's pop culture. They even gave us a preview of, I guess it's gonna be a game show exhibit that's coming in a year or so. And so you see props from, you know, famous game shows like The Price is Right back here that are gonna be restored and eventually gonna be put on display.
Twister.
We gotta have the Ellen show.
That's from Ellen? Oh.
Yes.
But walking through the video game section, oh man, I mean, I was blown away at every turn. Every aisle I went down, I'd spot a game, you know, just sitting on a shelf, and I'd be like, oh my goodness, like I haven't seen this in years, or it's super collectible. It was crazy. So guys, I'm telling you that the Strong Museum is no joke, man. I mean, if you ever come to this area and you are a fan of pop culture and video games, you have to check this out. Seriously, it was so worth the trip.
D3.
That's a hit.
I found the fiver. I haven't sunk it.
All right, it's a new day. It's Saturday and time to check out the RetroGameCon. This is the 10th year of this convention, and I could tell you there was a lot of anticipation here. Really big crowds just waiting to get in. I've mentioned this in previous travel videos, and I'm definitely noticing a lot of these events are mixing in pop culture with video games. Arts, crafts, action figures, toys, it's all here. And I think it makes sense because you can see how some of these expos like the San Diego Comic-Con have done so well mixing in all this pop culture, and all of these little expos are starting to do that as well. you just bring in more people, more people to get excited.
Hey everybody, I'm John St. John. You know me as the voice of Duke Nukem. Hail to the king, baby. Here at RetroGameCon in Syracuse, New York. What a great event this is. A lot of wonderful people, a lot of great vendors. I mean, just take a look around at all the vendors. It's fantastic. I've had the best time at this convention. I hope they have me back in the future. You should be here. RetroGameCon, Syracuse, New York. Make a note of it. You'll be sorry if you miss out.
When you do enough of these expos across the US, it's really interesting because you start to see things that make them feel unique. For instance, this one had an unusual amount of Atari 2600 games. That's something that I really haven't seen that much in the Seattle area. I'm not sure why. Maybe people in the Seattle area aren't interested in collecting Atari games, but over here, there were many vendors who had a lot of them on their tables. Also, there were a lot of people selling PSP and PlayStation Vita games here. I mean, more than I would normally see. What the hell are you doing here with this?
What's going on, man? Shooting on the PSP, 480 by 30. Figured why not, right?
Oh yeah, that is so cool.
Out of all the people shooting here, I'm probably the only one doing it on a PSP.
You are. But that's what makes you rad. Also, they had a really big focus on classic computers here in the free-to-play area. Again, I'll see a little bit of classic computers at every expo, but this one had rows and rows of them, all set up, all different types. Everyone could just walk up and play classic, computer games. That's pretty cool, right? Another thing I love about this expo is that they had bands playing while people were walking around the floor. Man, check out these dudes right here. This is a band called Megatronics, and they were cracking me up because they were acting like they were on stage in front of a massive audience like at Madison Square Garden. They were acting like rock stars. It was awesome. Around noon or 1 o'clock, I started noticing that there was a ton of people at this expo. I mean, it was crazy. And then I guess at one point, there were so many people that the fire marshal actually had to make sure that the room was not over capacity. Every time I think that maybe retro is slowing down or becoming less popular, oh man, I'm reminded that this is only getting more popular, especially at expos like this. Again, it was really well attended. Later on that afternoon, John Riggs and I did a panel that was packed too. Lots of great questions about game collecting and what music I'm listening to, also how YouTube works and all that sort of stuff. It was really cool. Lots of great people there. And then later that evening, to kind of wind down, a small group of us ended up going to a pub. It was this dude's birthday, and he wanted to drink this boot of beer. We had a really good time, maybe too good of a time. And so that, my friends, is a quick little highlight reel of my trip to Syracuse, New York, and the Retro Game Con. But this video is not over because you know that I picked up some video games and music, so let me share with you what I got. I'm continuing to collect physical 3DS games, and I saw this one here that was published by Limited Run Games back in 2020. This has a bunch of games included on a single cartridge, including some of my favorites like Mutant Mudds Deluxe and Zeo Drifter. Here's a Spider-Man game that I know nothing about on the 3DS, but kind of in the mood to collect Spider-Man games, and the 3DS probably has a unique version of that, so I wanted to pick it up. Here's one that I thought that looked pretty interesting, or maybe at least a little bit funny, and that is Pet Zombies. Now, I haven't played this yet, but I guess it's a pet sim spoof where you raise your own pet zombie, and each one of them has their own personality and dietary requirements, body maintenance. I don't know, it just sounds really weird. It's got the 3D effect to it, so got some mini games. I figured I'd pick it up. I mentioned Atari games, and here's a bit of a rare one here. So this is called Tanks But No Tanks, which is a great title. Now, I haven't played this game yet. I actually don't know anything about it. It was given to me by one of the vendors. It looks kind of interesting. I don't know, I'm gonna have to check it out. Here's another game that was a complete blind buy, and I hadn't heard of it, and it looks pretty cool. That is Bang Bang Busters on the Dreamcast. Supposedly this game came out in 2010, and I guess it's supposed to play kind of like Snow Brothers. It's basically an arcade game, so looks pretty cool, looks pretty colorful. Here is the Hotline Miami collection for the Switch, and man, I'll tell you what, for a while I was super addicted to playing Hotline Miami. If you haven't played that game, it's so much fun, incredibly tough, but also very addictive. And then I mentioned in the past that I am going for a complete PlayStation Portable game collection, and I found 2 of them at this expo that I did not have. They're not super hard to find, just for whatever reason I just didn't have them in the collection, including this James Bond game here from Russia with Love. To be honest, I was surprised I didn't have this in my collection because I do run across it every once in a while, but I think that might be actually the PlayStation 2 version. I forget, but yeah, I had to snag this. The vast majority of titles I'm missing from the collection are sports titles, and this is one of them, NBA Ballers Rebound. It's amazing how many NBA games, NFL games, hockey games, FIFA games, everything. There's way more than you expect on the PSP. Premium Edition Games had a booth there, and I thought I would take a chance on this game here. It sounds pretty interesting. It's called Raji, an Ancient Epic. I was not familiar with this, but I guess it's like a platforming fighting game. I guess it takes inspiration from games like Bastion and also God of War and even Journey, which sounds pretty interesting, so I'm excited to check this one out. I saw the physical version of this and I was like, oh yeah, I have to own it. That is Demon's Tilt on the PlayStation 4. This is a really cool horror-inspired pinball game that is kind of like a spiritual successor to Demon's Crush on the Sega Genesis. It's very old school feeling and also in its visuals, but it has a ton of like modern options when you dig deep into it. It's a fantastic digital pinball game. If you haven't tried it, give it a go. I saw this and I had no idea what it was. Originally I thought, oh, is this like a visual novel or a DLC? But no, it's actually an animated series. My wife and I are massive fans of the Dragon Age series, and I had no idea that this even existed, so I'm excited to check it out. At this expo, I was given 2 classic issues of Heavy Metal magazine, and I was so happy. I'm a huge fan of this magazine. When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to buy it because it did have nudity in it, but man, I love the art style and the stories, and I'm a huge fan of the early 1980s movie. These were very cool gifts. I don't have a ton of Heavy Metal magazines, but it's kind of inspiring to maybe start collecting some of these. That would be pretty cool. I've mentioned before that I'm collecting Xbox 360 faceplates. I'm going to eventually do a video for my channel on them because there are probably hundreds of them. And a dude at the expo found this in a Games Radar magazine and then laminated it for me to put on my wall in the game room. I thought that was pretty cool, kind of inspiration. I mentioned that I picked up some music at the expo, and this is the soundtrack to VVVVVV. That's an indie game that came out in 2010. It's an action-adventure game that was pretty popular at the time. I didn't realize that they actually published the soundtrack for it, but what surprised me is that when I pulled out the vinyl, you can see it's actually a picture disc, and it looks really cool. I don't think I've ever seen one quite like this. A fan of my channel walked up to me and gave me this album right here. It's The Eyes of the Beacon Street Union. I was not familiar with this band or this album, and I guess it came out in 1968, and basically it's American psychedelic rock. I put this on my turntable. It was actually the first album that I put on when I got home because I was very curious about it, and it's actually really good. I'll admit it's not the type of music I typically listen to, but I was getting into it. It's very groovy, it's very 60s sounding, again, very psychedelic and trippy. Yeah, I dig it. I was very excited to find a vinyl copy of this Rammstein album. This is the album that myself and probably a lot of people got introduced to the band because of the song Du Hast. But this album is just full of great songs, including another one I really like called Burg Dich. There was a time I was really into the band Cake, and this was the album that kind of got me introduced to the band. Now, of course, back then it was all on CD, but they had the vinyl release for it. Cake is an interesting band. They're obviously very poppy and kind of alternative, but they're one of the bands where I can kind of just shuffle their entire catalog and I can listen to every single song from them. They're kind of all the same, but also they're kind of all good. Back in high school when Skid Row first came out, this album right here was on everybody's stereo if you liked hair metal. Back then I just had I think the cassette or the CD, And I guess now they have a vinyl release of it, a physical vinyl release for it. So I had to snag this. In the 90s, when I was working at a record store, I discovered the band Stereolab, and I became obsessed with this band for many, many years. They're really trippy. They're another alternative band. They're kind of like 60s sounding, but they're more droney. A lot of people would compare them to like the Velvet Underground, but I actually think they're more listenable than the Velvet Underground. They can be kind of harsh, but I think they're more melodic. I don't know. It's just, I really like Stereolab a lot, and this is a great album from that era. I've also been digging into the back catalog of REO Speedwagon, a band that I don't really know that much about. I mean, obviously in the 80s they had a bunch of ballads, and I don't typically like ballads, but going back and listening to some of their earlier albums where they're a little bit more rockin', I dig it a lot actually. But I do love the song Riding the Storm Out, and the good news is this is like a $5 album. It's not expensive. And then this is another gift from a viewer of my channel. This is a Nintendo water bottle that I guess they bought at the Nintendo store in New York. So always cool to have these in the collection. It'll actually be up on the shelf, so thank you very much. And so that, guys, is my entire trip to Syracuse, New York, and all the pickups I got. And as you can see by this video, I just had a great time visiting there. Obviously, I would go back in a second. It was beautiful. The people were so nice. They were so happy that I was there. They were so appreciative that I traveled so far to be there and hang out with them. And so I would definitely go back. But anyways, guys, as always, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.